Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Rubio and members of committee for having me here today. I'm here with my friend and colleague Dan Baer, whom I've worked very closely over the past several years in promoting democracy and human rights issues in Asia and Pacific. Mr. Chairman, as you and Ranking Member Rubio mentioned, the U.S. is bound to Asia Pacific through geography, history, alliances, trade, and people-to-people ties, and those will only grow in importance over the next decade and beyond. Over the past 4 years, the U.S. government has made a deliberate strategic effort to broaden and deepen our engagement in the region in what has come to be known as rebalance to the Asia Pacific. This strategic rebalance is based on the recognition that the Asia Pacific's political and economic future and the future of the US are deeply linked. The rebalance to the Asia Pacific region covers a broad range of strategic objectives, deepening our alliances in the region, boosting economic growth and trade, strengthening our relationships with emerging powers such as China, Indonesia, Vietnam, and India, expanding good governance, developing energy efficiency and environment protection, and especially expanding people-to-people ties. And while the rebalance reflects the importance of U.S. government places on our strategic and economic engagement in the region, the dimension that binds the entire strategy together is our strong support for advancing democracy and human rights, what I would call our value issues. Democracy and respect for human rights are increasingly part of the fabric of the Asia Pacific. In fact, according to Freedom House's most recent Freedom in the World report, during the past 5 years, the Asia Pacific region has shown the greatest progress in the world in achieving steady gains in political rights and civil liberties. Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, several examples come to our mind as well. Indonesia being one of them, so is Timor-Leste, Thailand, Taiwan, and more. Most recently, we have seen very positive developments in Burma that have allowed us to open a new chapter in bilateral relations. In November last year, President Obama became the first sitting U.S. president to visit Burma. During his visit, he emphasized that the U.S. would help Burma solidify the progress it has made, especially in addressing human rights challenges, and also we would help them strengthen the hand of those seeking further reform. At the same time that we have seen these positive developments, we continue to press for improvements with those governments that fall short on human rights and whose democratic institutions remain weak. As Ranking Member Rubio mentioned, North Korea is a case in point. North Korea's nearly 25 million people is in dire need of improvement in their welfare, protection of human rights, and that remains an essential goal of our overall North Korea policy. The U.S. also remains deeply concerned about the continued deterioration in the human rights situation in China. We will continue to discuss human rights issues frankly with our Chinese counterparts and press them to respect the rule of law and protect the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all of its citizens. Mr. Chairman, we recognize that there is much more work need to be done, especially in countries I have just mentioned, as well as in countries like Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, to ensure that all citizens enjoy media freedom and freedom of expression, that is, and that there is space for civil society to have their voices heard. We remain quite concerned about the disappearance of Lao civil society activist Sombath Sopon. In Cambodia, we have consistently raised our concerns about the case of exiled opposition leader Sam Rainsy. Clearly, there is a significant amount of work still to be done, but there are also many examples of work where we have worked very closely with our partners in the region to promote a variety of human rights and democracy issues. We emphasize the dependence of democratic institutions on a strong rule of law. We make it a priority to protect the rights of women around the world and empower them economically and politically. We also promote the protection of the human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons around the world. We have joined with Indonesia, the Philippines, and 5 other founding governments to launch a global forum, the Open Government Partnership, where governments work closely with civil society to develop action plans with concrete commitments to improve transparency of governments and how they serve the people. And these are just a few examples of many ways in which we actively support democracy and human rights in the region. Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I'm pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bear?
Thank you very much, Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Rubio, and Senator Johnson for being here, and thank you to the committee for hosting this hearing and inviting me to testify with my good friend and colleague, Joe Ewen. As Joe said, we've had the opportunity to work very closely together, and it's been a great professional joy for me. The Obama administration's rebalance is a purposeful strategic move in our foreign policy. It's motivated by the opportunity to develop deeper and wider-ranging partnerships in a part of the world that is increasingly important to American interests. Headline news coverage of the pivot often focuses on issues of hard security and trade agreements. The role of political progress, in particular the advance of human rights and democracy, is less frequently a strand in the public discourse. So the topic of this hearing fills a gap and gives us an opportunity to consider important questions. Does the rebalance as a purposeful addition to the U.S. foreign policy include progress on human rights and democracy as part of its objectives? And does progress or lack thereof on human rights and democratic governance affect the prospects of achieving the full range of objectives that motivate the broader rebalance? The questions are related, of course, and the answer to both is a firm yes. In the second half of the 20th century, human rights were a clear pillar in our regional foreign policy with respect to Europe. We recognized that it was not only our moral convictions, but our economic and security interests that would be best met by a democratic Europe. The underlying truths haven't changed. Human rights and democracy are foundational to our foreign policy because they are foundational to our polity, and also because U.S. national interests will be most durably met by a world in which states are part of a stable, rule-based order. That stable order can only be grounded on the durable peace that human rights and democratic governance deliver. That belief animated President Obama's 2011 speech to the Australian Parliament announcing the rebalance and the necessity of U.S. leadership in support of human rights as a central element of it. Because while the region includes big and fast-growing economies and opportunities for more effective partnerships, we can't forget that the region also includes many hundreds of millions of people who have yet to experience protections for their human rights. It includes strongmen who manipulate flawed elections and suppress speech in order to stay in power. It includes places where the rule of law is notably absent and where members of religious and other minorities suffer abuses with impunity. And it includes governments that treat the internet as a new threat to be regulated and controlled rather than as a platform for free expression and opportunity. For as long as these conditions remain, both the region's potential progress and the potential dividends of our engagement will be hampered. There's much to gain, in my view, but achieving the full potential return on our investment, both for our citizens and for the people of the region, depends on political progress. In his speech in Canberra, President Obama spoke specifically to 3 ways in which we're exercising leadership. First, he said that we strengthen civil society because it empowers citizens to hold their governments accountable. Burma's budding democratic transition will succeed only if the country's civil society is strong and can help drive it. That's why we continue to press that the political leaders recently released from Burmese prisons return to society with their full civil rights restored. It's why we've encouraged the government to engage civil society directly, including in the recently formed committee that is charged with working through the remaining political prisoner cases. And it's why the administration's reporting requirements will ask U.S. investors how they have conducted human rights due diligence. In Cambodia, civil society organized and led a campaign to resist a menacing proposed NGO law. We supported their efforts, and former Secretary Clinton repeatedly urged the Cambodian government to scrap the law. Prime Minister Hun Sen eventually announced that the NGO law would be shelved and would not be brought forward again without civil society support. Other challenges remain, of course, in Cambodia. We were deeply disturbed to see the rearrest of Born Sonang and Sukson Un, who are widely viewed as scapegoats in the 2004 murder of union leader Che Vichea. Opposition leader Sam Rainsy remains in self-imposed exile to avoid imprisonment on politically motivated charges. And while we welcomed Mam Sanando's release last week as a positive step, the charges continue to hang over his head and others remain in jail. The second element President Obama committed us to was the advance of the rights of all people, including women, religious minorities, and other vulnerable populations. Members of this subcommittee know that there are parts of the region where not only are members of minority groups not protected, but their rights are actively targeted for repression. The United States remains deeply concerned about repressive Chinese policies that threaten the distinct cultural, linguistic, and religious heritage of Tibetans, and that have contributed to a climate of increasing desperation in which more than 100 Tibetans have resorted to self-immolation. In Xinjiang, where I visited in late 2011, members of the Uyghur population continue to face discrimination, arbitrary detention, and restrictions on religious freedom and freedom of movement. Unsurprisingly, tensions remain high. Almost everyone is vulnerable to abuses and violations in North Korea. Just this week, the United States is supporting a resolution at the Human Rights Council to create a commission of inquiry into the systematic and widespread abuses committed by that regime. Finally, in Canberra, the President said, "We encourage open government because democracies depend on an informed and active citizenry." The Open Government Partnership is being chaired by Indonesia this year, but initiatives like the OGP only work when they're supported by an open and active civil society. So the United States will continue to press for progress to ensure protections for freedom of expression, association, and assembly. One area where this is particularly important, where there are worrying trends in some parts of the region, is the internet and new connection technologies. In countries like Vietnam, which has an impressive level of internet penetration, but a large number of bloggers and others who've been imprisoned for what they said online, we must continue to make the case that human rights apply online as they do offline. We need to underscore that it's no coincidence that Silicon Valley is in a country where ideas are exchanged freely, and that Vietnam's Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg won't be able to contribute to the growth of their country if he or she is sitting in a prison cell because of something written online. I know that Secretary Kerry, who has long maintained a deep personal interest in the region, is committed to carrying forward the work of leading the rebalance in a way that advances all of the interests of the United States, including a strong, rule-based global order grounded in respect for human rights that enables durable economic prosperity and peace. Thanks very much for having me, and I'll be happy to take your questions.